The galaxy's most feared assassin stood in Ethan Cole's living room, holding a plasma dagger that hummed menacingly. The blade flickered blue, casting an eerie glow on Ethan's bewildered face. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. Ethan, still in his Star Wars pajama pants, clutching his half-eaten grilled cheese, stared at the armored figure like a deer caught in headlights. "You have been marked for termination," the assassin growled. Ethan blinked. Did Jeff put you up to this?" The assassin's visor narrowed, clearly unamused. "I am Zarlok the Shadow, elite killer of the Vorgoth Empire. Your death shall be swift." Ethan licked melted cheese off his finger and sighed. "Look, dude, if you're selling magazine subscriptions, I'm not interested." Zarlok lunged. The plasma dagger slashed through the air, narrowly missing Ethan's head. Shredded fabric fluttered down from his now ventilated curtain. That's when it clicked. This wasn't a prank. This guy wanted him dead. "Oh crap!" Ethan yelped, bolting into the kitchen. Zarlok stormed after him, stomping with the grace of a rhinoceros. Ethan grabbed a frying pan off the counter and flung it wildly. It clanged off Zarlok's helmet, knocking the assassin back just enough for Ethan to dive behind the kitchen island. "Your pathetic resistance is pointless," Zarlok snarled, shaking off the daze. He vaulted over the counter, landing with a metallic thud. Ethan scrambled to his feet, flinging whatever he could grab, a banana, a salt shaker, a bottle of sriracha. Nothing slowed Zarlok. Okay, Ethan stammered. "Let's talk about this. Maybe you've got the wrong guy." "You are Ethan Cole," Zarlok declared. "That's technically true, but you hacked Vorgotha's military data vault. The Overlord demands your head." Ethan's mind raced. A week ago, he'd been trying to download a rare bootleg cut of Blade Runner. His hacking had been less spy thriller and more. Accidentally clicked on the wrong server. Now there was a 7-foot alien assassin in his kitchen, and the floor was covered in sriracha and salt. "Look," Ethan said, dodging another swipe of the plasma blade. "I'm not some super spy. I was just trying to watch a movie." Zarlok lunged again. Desperate, Ethan grabbed his Roomba and flung it at the assassin's feet. The robot vacuum whirred to life, spinning in chaotic circles. Zarlok stumbled, accidentally kicking it straight into the table leg. The Roomba beeped in defiance before powering down. "Great, now you've killed my vacuum!" Ethan shouted. "I hope you're happy!" Zarlok raised his blade again, but his foot slid across the sriracha-slicked floor. With an awkward wobble, he crashed face first into the stove. "Oh my god!" Ethan gasped. "You're like the worst assassin ever." Groaning, Zarlok rose shakily, armor now covered in sauce and bits of banana. "You got lucky," he hissed before stumbling out the front door in shame. Hours later, Vorgoth sat on his throne, watching the blurry security footage of Zarlok's humiliating retreat. His fingers dug into the armrests, his expression a mask of cold rage. The mighty Galactic Overlord, destroyer of worlds, watched as his best assassin tripped over a cleaning robot and fled from a man wearing cartoon-printed pajama pants. "Send the war machine," Vorgoth snarled. Meanwhile, Ethan sat on his couch, still in disbelief. His apartment smelled like burned sriracha, and his curtains had a fresh dagger-shaped hole. He opened his laptop, determined to find out what had gotten him into this mess. After digging through encrypted files he didn't remember downloading, he found it, a folder labeled Vorgotha's Armada Strategy 2875. "Oh no," Ethan muttered. "I hacked a galactic warlord." The next day, Ethan awoke to a thunderous crash outside his apartment. The ground trembled, his windows rattled, and car alarms blared in unison. He peeked outside and saw something that looked like a walking tank, 8 feet tall, metal plating like armor, and arms the size of tree trunks. The behemoth stomped across the street, shoving parked cars aside like toys. "Ethan Cole!" the mechanical voice bellowed. "Come out and face Grimmix!" "Oh, come on!" Ethan groaned. He grabbed his laptop and sprinted out the back door. Grim Max smashed through his neighbor's fence as Ethan bolted down the alley. The towering assassin followed, stepping through walls like they were paper. "Stand still and die!" Grim Max roared. "Hard pass!" Ethan yelled back. He ducked into a hardware store, heart pounding. Grim Max burst through the wall seconds later. Thinking fast, Ethan grabbed an air compressor and fired a blast of pressurized air directly into Grimmax's face. The blast staggered the metal brute, sending him crashing into a shelf of paint cans. Cans erupted in a rainbow explosion, coating Grim Max in streaks of red, blue, and yellow. "You cannot escape!" Grim Max rumbled, shaking the paint off. Ethan bolted through the exit. Racing home, he hacked into his neighbor's security drone system. Using a custom program, he hijacked the nearest drone and flew it straight into Grimmax's back, embedding itself in the seams of his armor. Grimmax convulsed, sparks crackling along his frame as his systems glitched. Moments later, Ethan stood in front of his webcam, recording a message directly addressed to Vorgoth. "Hey, Overlord guy," he smirked. "Stop sending your goons, I've got grilled cheese, sarcasm, and Wi-Fi. Bring it on." The video went viral across interstellar networks. Millions of beings across Vorgoth's empire watched a baffled Earthman roast their feared ruler. On his warship's bridge, Vorgoth's face twisted with fury. His generals stood frozen, unsure whether to laugh or run. "Send the blade," Vorgoth hissed. "Nix the silent blade." Back on Earth, Ethan closed his laptop with a smug grin. He had no idea that his biggest threat, and most unexpected ally, was already on her way. The morning started with a sharp knock at Ethan's door. Still half asleep, he shuffled to the door in his socks, regretting the 3 energy drinks he'd downed the night before. When he cracked the door open, he didn't expect to be staring at a towering metal giant standing in the middle of his street. Grim Max, the war machine, had returned. Only this time, it looked even angrier. "Ethan Cole." The mechanical voice thundered again, vibrating the glass in his windows. "Your mockery has sealed your fate." "Oh, come on," Ethan muttered, slamming the door and locking it with every bolt he had. A second later, the entire front wall of his apartment crumbled as Grim Max stomped directly through it. Chunks of drywall and splintered wood exploded across the room as Grimmax's massive steel frame forced its way inside. Ethan dodged behind his couch just in time to avoid being flattened. Grimmax's glowing red eyes locked onto him, and the war machine's arm transformed into a crackling energy cannon. "You cannot hide, worm," Grim Max growled. "Who's hiding?" Ethan shot back. "I'm running!" He bolted for the back door just as a plasma blast scorched his living room rug, turning his coffee table into molten slag. Grimmax's heavy footsteps thundered behind him as Ethan sprinted through the alley behind his apartment. Each step felt like an earthquake. Trash cans went flying as Grim Max tore through the alley's narrow path, his metal body scraping against brick walls and bending streetlights out of shape. "Stand still and I'll make this painless," Grim Max rumbled. "Yeah, see, that's not super convincing," Ethan called back. His mind raced. He needed a plan, fast. His eyes landed on a nearby auto repair garage. He bolted inside and slammed the metal roll-up door shut just as Grimmax reached the entrance. "You think a door can stop me?" Grimmax's fist punched through the metal like it was tinfoil. Ethan grabbed a mechanic's toolbox and flung it. Wrenches and bolts clattered harmlessly off Grimmax's armor. The war machine barely reacted. "You are really bad at this," Grimmax sneered, stepping through the ruined doorframe. Ethan grabbed a power drill off a nearby table and jammed it into the war machine's knee joint. Sparks flew, and Grimmax's leg buckled for a moment. "Ha!" Ethan shouted. "See? Not so invincible after all!" Grimmax roared in frustration and swung his arm, sending Ethan sprawling across the floor. His head throbbed, and his ribs ached, but he managed to scramble back to his feet. He spotted a large air compressor nearby, its pressure gauge flickering in the red. Grim Max lunged forward again, his mechanical fingers stretching out to grab Ethan's throat. At the last second, Ethan grabbed the air compressor's hose, shoved it into Grimmax's exposed knee joint, and yanked the trigger. With a deafening hiss, compressed air blasted into the war machine's inner systems. Pistons sputtered, sparks danced across Grimmax's armor, and the war machine stumbled back like a malfunctioning wind-up toy. You cannot defeat Grimmax, the voice stuttered as circuits overloaded. I disagree, Ethan shouted. Grimmax tried to steady himself, but Ethan grabbed a nearby wrench and slammed it against the war machine's control panel on its chest. Sparks erupted in every direction as Grimmax's systems flickered and shut down. The towering figure fell forward like a collapsing building, landing face first in the center of the garage. Breathing heavily, Ethan staggered back, staring at the smoldering wreck. His heart still pounded, and he wiped sweat from his face. Somehow, he had survived yet another attempt on his life. His relief was short-lived. Through the ruined garage door, Ethan spotted something far worse. Hovering in the sky, an enormous projection of Vorgotha's furious face loomed above the city. His voice boomed across the skyline, echoing through every street. People of Earth! This insignificant human has defied my assassins, mocked my empire, and insulted my name. I, Vorgoth the Conqueror, demand justice. I have sent my greatest blade, Nyx the Silent, to finish what the others could not. She will not fail. When she finds you, Ethan Cole, there will be no escape. The projection vanished, and Ethan felt his stomach churn. Vorgotha's assassins had been terrifying enough. But now he was sending his greatest weapon, Nyx the Silent Blade. Ethan didn't know who she was, but her name alone told him everything he needed to know. He was in serious trouble. Ethan stumbled home, exhausted, bruised, and covered in grease from his encounter with Grimmax. His apartment looked like a war zone. The wall was still missing, furniture was overturned, and his Roomba lay crushed in the corner like a squashed bug. He grabbed his laptop, knowing he had to do something before this mysterious Nyx arrived. Ethan spent hours digging through the stolen data files he had accidentally downloaded. Buried deep in the documents, he found references to Vorgotha's assassins, including Nyx. Her file was disturbingly brief. No recorded failures. No known weaknesses. The file listed her as an infiltrator, a master of stealth and deception. Unlike the brutish Grimmax or the clumsy Zarlok, Nyx was precise. No one had survived her before. Just thinking about it made Ethan's chest tighten. He knew sarcasm and dumb luck wouldn't save him this time. He needed to outsmart her, assuming he even saw her coming. Days passed with no sign of Nyx. Ethan barely slept. Every shadow in his apartment felt suspicious. Every flicker of movement on the street sent his heart racing. He set up traps, strings tied to bells on the doors, motion sensors wired to his phone, even a pile of empty soda cans near his windows. None of it made him feel safe. Late one night, Ethan sat in his dimly lit living room, clutching a baseball bat. His eyes burned from exhaustion, and his head drooped. He didn't remember falling asleep. When he woke, Nyx was already in the room. She stood in the shadows, motionless, her piercing violet eyes fixed on him. Dressed in sleek black armor with twin daggers strapped to her sides, she looked like a living shadow. Ethan froze. He had no idea how long she had been standing there. You don't need to do this, Ethan said quietly, gripping the bat tighter. You misunderstand, Nyx replied softly. I'm not here to kill you. Ethan's mind reeled. He didn't know if she was bluffing or setting him up for some twisted game. Vorgoth is obsessed with his pride, she continued. He doesn't care that you're just some unlucky fool. He won't stop until you're dead, and I'm supposed to be the one to finish it. Supposed to? Ethan asked warily. Nyx's expression softened just slightly. I've spent my entire life taking orders. But Vorgoth isn't unbeatable. He's afraid of you, not because you're powerful, but because you've made him look weak. You're saying, you want to help? Ethan asked. If I help you, Nyx said, stepping closer, Vorgotha's reign could crumble. His empire isn't as strong as he claims. People are already starting to question him after your colorful messages. Ethan's mouth twitched. You mean when I called him a space clown? Nyx's lips almost curved into a smile. Yes, that. For the first time in weeks, Ethan felt something resembling hope. If Vorgotha's deadliest assassin was willing to switch sides, maybe, just maybe, Earth had a chance. Ethan sat on his battered couch, still processing the fact that Vorgotha's deadliest assassin was now standing in his living room, offering to help. Nyx's violet eyes seemed to pierce right through him, calculating, cold, yet oddly calm. The silence between them felt suffocating. So, just to be clear, Ethan said carefully, you're supposed to kill me, but now you're not? Nyx's expression remained unreadable. If I follow my orders, you die. If I disobey, Vorgoth kills me. Either way, this ends badly for someone. Well, Ethan said with forced optimism, if we both stay alive, I'd consider that a win. Nyx barely blinked. It's not that simple. Ethan ran a hand down his face, trying to think. His apartment still smelled faintly of scorched sriracha, and the hole where Grim Max had stormed through the wall had been lazily covered by a hanging bedsheet. The odds of him surviving this entire mess seemed impossible. Yet somehow, here he was, still breathing, with Vorgotha's own assassin now standing on his side. All right, Ethan said finally. If you really want to help, where do we start? Nyx's eyes flickered toward his laptop. Vorgotha's communication network. If we can break into it, we might be able to expose him. You mean hack him? Ethan asked, feeling a small sense of pride. I'm kinda good at that. Nyx crossed her arms. Good enough to accidentally trigger a Galactic warlord's personal security system? Okay, fair, Ethan admitted. But I'm still here. Barely, Nyx muttered. Ethan set up his laptop, hands flying over the keyboard as he sifted through the stolen files he'd found earlier. Nyx stood by the window, her gaze sharp, scanning the street for threats. Her presence was unnervingly quiet. She moved like a shadow, calm, fluid, precise. It was hard to believe she was the same person whose name had been whispered across the galaxy like a death sentence. Hours passed, and Ethan's eyes strained against the glare of his laptop screen. He finally found what he was looking for, a backdoor into Vorgotha's encrypted transmission channels. It was buried deep in the data he'd accidentally downloaded, disguised as a maintenance code. I think I've got something, Ethan muttered. This should let me hijack his fleet's communications. Can you send a message directly to his generals? Nyx asked. Ethan nodded. Yeah, but if I do, Vorgotha's gonna know someone's poking around. He already knows you're alive, Nyx replied. We might as well hit him hard. Ethan hesitated. You think anyone's actually gonna turn against him? They're afraid, Nyx said. His generals know what happens when people fail him. If you embarrass him publicly, make him look weak, they'll start asking questions. Soldiers don't follow weak leaders. Ethan rubbed his face. All right, guess I'm about to annoy a space tyrant. After a few keystrokes, the screen flickered, and a transmission link connected to a live signal. Vorgotha's snarling face appeared in the grainy image, his crown-like helm glinting under harsh red lighting. His expression twisted with rage the second he saw Ethan. You, Vorgoth spat. You insignificant little insect, how are you still breathing? Hey, Vorgoth! Ethan grinned, trying to mask his fear with forced confidence. I'm just calling to let you know you should probably stop sending your weird space assassins. They're terrible at their jobs. Vorgotha's eyes burned with fury. You mock me at your own peril, human. My fleet is already preparing to reduce your planet to ash. Yeah? Ethan leaned forward, flashing a grin. Well, I'm sure your generals will be super excited to know that you're wasting their resources chasing one guy in a broken apartment with a busted Roomba. The image wavered for a second as Ethan triggered the broadcast function. Every active channel in Vorgotha's fleet, from command officers to low-level maintenance crews, now had a direct feed to the Overlord's furious face. Vorgotha's generals, all visible on tiny screens flanking his image, began murmuring. Some of them looked confused. Others looked nervous. You think this is clever? Vorgoth snarled. You think this pathetic trick will change anything? I think, Ethan said with a smirk, that you're about to find out your empire isn't as stable as you think. Nyx stepped into view beside Ethan. Her presence startled Vorgoth, and his expression shifted from rage to confusion. You, Vorgoth hissed. You betrayed me. I chose survival, Nyx replied coldly. And I chose the side that's actually winning. The murmurs from the generals grew louder. Even over the weak transmission signal, Ethan could see the unease spreading among the ranks. Soldiers whispered behind their commanders, some exchanging uncertain glances. Vorgoth's furious expression faltered for a moment as he realized what was happening. Doubt was seeping into his empire. You'll die for this, Vorgoth growled. All of you. The feed cut out abruptly. The screen went dark. That felt satisfying, Ethan said, leaning back with a shaky breath. He won't let this stand, Nyx warned. We just embarrassed him in front of half his fleet. He's coming, and he won't stop this time. Ethan knew she was right. Vorgoth's pride had been wounded, and wounded tyrants were dangerous. If Vorgoth was going to retaliate, they needed a plan. We can't win a straight fight, Ethan said. But maybe we can make Earth too much of a problem for him to deal with. Nyx tilted her head. What are you thinking? We make him look even weaker, Ethan said. We leak everything, his battle plans, his failures, everything. We make him seem like a clown before the entire galaxy. Nyx's lips curled slightly. You're suggesting we humiliate the most dangerous warlord in the galaxy, twice? Hey, Ethan said with a shrug. I've got a track record. For the next several hours, Ethan and Nyx worked together, compiling everything they could, files on Vorgoth's poor leadership, failed invasions, and internal betrayals. Nyx provided first-hand details about Vorgoth's paranoia and instability. By the time they were finished, Ethan had a mountain of evidence that painted Vorgoth as a crumbling, insecure tyrant desperately holding on to power. Ethan sat in front of his webcam once more. Hey there, Galaxy, he began with a grin. I've got some juicy gossip for you about everyone's favorite space dictator. The broadcast spread faster than Ethan expected. Planets under Vorgoth's control erupted with protests. Military officers defected. Rebel forces organized. Rumors swirled that Vorgoth's own generals were preparing to turn against him. The mighty empire that had once seemed untouchable was now trembling under the weight of doubt and rebellion. Hours later, Vorgoth's warships appeared in Earth's orbit. Ethan and Nyx watched from a rooftop as the night sky flickered with the glow of distant ships. Ethan's heart pounded. He's not just here for you, Nyx said grimly. He's here to make an example out of Earth. Ethan stared at the sky, fear twisting in his stomach. He knew this wasn't over, the worst was still to come. But for the first time since this whole nightmare began, he felt something he hadn't felt before. Hope. The night sky over Earth had turned into a canvas of flickering lights, each one a warship hovering in orbit, poised to strike. Ethan stood on the rooftop beside Nyx, the cold wind biting at his face as he stared upward. The sheer number of ships was overwhelming, an armada large enough to reduce the entire planet to rubble. His earlier bravado now felt dangerously foolish. He had humiliated the galaxy's most feared warlord, and now the consequences were about to arrive. He's going to destroy everything, Ethan muttered, feeling his stomach twist. All of this, because I hacked a stupid file. Nyx's gaze remained fixed on the sky, her expression cold and calculating. He's not here to destroy Earth, she said. He's here to erase you. Vorgoth doesn't just kill his enemies, he makes examples out of them. But if he wanted to destroy Earth outright, he wouldn't have brought this many ships. Ethan's mind raced. So there's still a chance? There's always a chance, Nyx said, but only if we act fast. They hurried back inside to Ethan's chaotic apartment. Cables tangled across the floor, monitors blinked with multiple open programs, and the remnants of his failed traps, empty soda cans, string, and duct tape, lay scattered in forgotten piles. The room smelled faintly of scorched electronics and spilled energy drinks. Ethan grabbed his laptop and booted it up, fingers flying over the keyboard as he accessed the backdoor signal he'd discovered earlier. I can tap into their fleet's communications again, Ethan said. But if Vorgoth sees me trying to hijack their system, he'll just blast Earth out of spite. You won't need to hijack anything, Nix said quietly. I can get you inside. Ethan paused and stared at her. What does that mean? I know their codes. I know how they think, Nix explained. If I impersonate one of his officers, I can give you enough time to send your message, but you'll have to act fast. You're trusting me to handle the technical part? Ethan said, half laughing. You do realize the last time I tried hacking these guys, I nearly died in my pajamas? I know, Nix said with a faint smirk. But it's the only option we have. Minutes later, Ethan's screen lit up as Nix connected them to the fleet's command system. The screen flickered, displaying a stern-faced officer in dark armor. Nix shifted her stance and adopted a cold, authoritative tone. Vorgoth's orders, she barked. We have an infiltrator disrupting communications. Isolate all command channels immediately. The officer hesitated. We weren't given. You questioning the Overlord? Nix snapped. Do you want to end up like the last general who hesitated? The officer stiffened and quickly cut the feed. Nix turned to Ethan. That bought you a few minutes. Ethan opened the backdoor connection and dug into the fleet's network. His fingers danced across the keyboard as he bypassed firewall after firewall. Each layer of security threatened to lock him out, but somehow, miraculously, he found his way inside. He activated the fleet's internal broadcast system. 100 warships were now tuned into whatever Ethan said next. He felt his palms sweat as he stared at the blinking cursor on the screen. His voice shook when he finally spoke. Hey there, folks, he began awkwardly. I know you're probably busy getting ready to vaporize my entire planet, but maybe reconsider? He clicked a button and broadcast a data file, the one Nix had helped him gather, detailing Vorgoth's failures, his growing paranoia, his lies, and his crumbling empire. Screens across the fleet flickered with the exposed truth. Ethan knew most of those soldiers weren't loyal, they were afraid. And now they had reason to question the man they feared. This is the guy you're about to die for, Ethan continued. The guy who's lied to you, sacrificed you, and thrown his own people under the bus every time something goes wrong. If you want to follow him into the fire, that's your call. But maybe, just maybe, you deserve better. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, one by one, the ship's signals began vanishing from the system. Warships turned away from Earth's orbit. Captains, the ones who had been forced to serve under Vorgoth's rule, had seen enough. In the heart of the fleet, Vorgoth's flagship remained motionless, unwilling to retreat. His face appeared on Ethan's screen once more, a mask of absolute fury. You think this changes anything? Vorgoth roared. You think you've won? I think I've done enough. Ethan shot back. But if you're still feeling brave, why don't you come down here and handle me yourself? Vorgoth's face twisted with rage, but before he could reply, a blaring alarm echoed from his command room. Another ship, smaller but sleek and fast, appeared on the screen. Nix's expression darkened. That's a destroyer, she muttered. He's not retreating, he's coming to kill you himself. Ethan felt his blood turn cold. Yeah, I figured this would happen. Moments later, Vorgoth's destroyer entered the atmosphere, streaking down like a flaming spear. Ethan grabbed his laptop and bolted from his apartment, Nix close behind. The ground trembled as the ship landed in a nearby park, vaporizing a chunk of trees in a flash of fire and smoke. A ramp extended from the ship's hull, and Vorgoth emerged, clad in obsidian armor lined with glowing crimson veins. His plasma sword blazed as he stepped forward. You think your pathetic tricks can stop me? Vorgoth snarled. You've made a mockery of my empire. For that, I will burn your planet to the ground. Ethan glanced at Nix, panic rising. You got a plan? Stay alive, Nix said simply, drawing her daggers. Vorgoth charged with terrifying speed, swinging his plasma sword with enough force to cleave a car in half. Nyx intercepted him, her daggers flashing in rapid arcs as she deflected each blow. Sparks flew as their blades clashed, lighting up the night. Ethan stumbled backward, realizing there was little he could do in a fight like this. But then he noticed something: the glowing red veins across Vorgotha's armor. His power suit relied on an energy core, and that core was embedded in the center of his chest. "Nyx!" Ethan shouted. "His chest, the core!" Nyx dodged a brutal strike, twisting her body midair and hurling one of her daggers. The blade struck true, lodging itself into the core. Sparks erupted as Vorgoth staggered back, his armor flickering. "You dare!" Vorgoth growled, but before he could finish, Ethan lunged forward with nothing but a brick he had grabbed from the ground. He slammed it directly into the exposed core. The impact shattered the glowing casing, and Vorgotha's armor flared violently before his body convulsed. Energy surged around him, and with a final burst of sparks, the mighty warlord collapsed face first into the dirt. Ethan stood frozen, brick still in hand. His breathing was ragged, and his hands shook. "Did I just kill a space tyrant with a brick?" Ethan gasped. Nyx knelt beside Vorgotha's body, inspecting the remains. "Looks like it." The remaining warships scattered across the sky, fleeing in panic as news of Vorgotha's death spread across the fleet. The galaxy had just witnessed the fall of one of its greatest tyrants, all because a stubborn, sarcastic Earthman refused to die quietly. As the sky cleared, Ethan turned to Nyx. "So, what now?" Ethan sat on his worn-out couch, feeling the strange stillness that had settled over his life. The galaxy's greatest warlord was dead, his armada had scattered, and Earth was still standing. It was over. At least, that's what he kept telling himself. But the anxiety wouldn't leave him. Every creak of the floor, every distant siren outside made him twitch. He had survived far too much in too short a time to believe peace would last. Nyx was in the kitchen, absent-mindedly spinning one of her daggers on the counter. She had barely spoken since Vorgotha's fall, and Ethan couldn't blame her. She had spent years as one of Vorgotha's most trusted assassins, and now she was stuck here, on Earth, without a purpose. Ethan doubted she'd find much fulfillment in Earth's limited entertainment options. "I don't know what to do now," Ethan admitted, breaking the silence. Nyx glanced at him and smirked faintly. "Did you have a plan before you became the galaxy's most wanted?" "Not really," Ethan said. "I was just trying to download a movie." Nyx's smirk grew a little wider, but the quiet returned quickly. Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was still wrong. Vorgoth was dead, but power vacuums didn't stay empty for long. Somewhere out there, someone would step in to claim the empire Vorgoth had left behind. The knock on the door made Ethan jump. He stared at Nyx, who had already drawn her blade. Slowly, Ethan crept toward the door and opened it just a crack. A short, insectoid alien with oversized goggles and a vest covered in glowing gadgets peered up at him. "You Ethan Cole?" the creature asked, voice crackling through a metallic translator box. Maybe," Ethan said, eyes flicking to Nyx, who stood silently, ready to strike. The alien grinned. "Don't worry, I'm not here to kill you. Name's Threx. I used to run communications for Vorgotha's armada. Figured I should drop by since, well, you kinda turned my entire career upside down." "Fantastic," Ethan muttered. "Look, if this is about me broadcasting Vorgotha's failures to the galaxy." "Oh no," Threx interrupted. "That part was brilliant. I mean, yeah, I lost my job, but it was worth it to see that smug idiot Vorgoth get humiliated. The problem is, someone else didn't find it so funny." Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "Who?" "The Crimson Syndicate," Threx said grimly. "They were loyal to Vorgoth, but more importantly, they really liked his money. Now that he's gone, they're grabbing whatever power they can, territories, weapons, even surviving warships." Ethan ran his hand down his face. "Of course they are. They want revenge," Threx continued. "They've already put a price on your head. 50,000 credits." 50,000? Ethan blurted. That's all I'm worth. That's a lot of money, Threx said. You'll have bounty hunters, mercenaries, and pirate gangs tripping over each other to cash in. Ethan groaned and slumped back against the wall. I thought beating Vorgoth was supposed to fix things. Beating Vorgoth didn't fix things, Nyx said quietly from the kitchen. It just changed who's coming after you. We need a plan, Ethan muttered. We can't just sit here waiting for the next psycho with a plasma sword to kick my door down. I've got an idea, Threx said. It's risky, but well, your whole life's kind of a mess anyway. Ethan sighed. Yeah, let's hear it. Threx leaned closer, lowering his voice as if the walls might be listening. Vorgoth's central command station, the one orbiting his old capital planet, is still active. There's enough data inside to rip apart what's left of his empire. If we can broadcast that information, we'll expose every dirty deal he ever made: blackmail, bribery, sabotage. The syndicate won't have anything left to fight for. That sounds fantastic, Ethan said. Except for the part where I'm pretty sure there's a billion guards and automated lasers protecting that station. That's where I come in, Nyx said. I've been inside that station before. I know the layout. And that's where I come in, Threx added. I've got access codes that should still be active. You two sound way too confident, Ethan muttered. You survived Vorgoth, Nyx said flatly. I think you'll manage. The plan formed quickly, but Ethan's nerves never settled. By the time they'd boarded Threx's beaten-down freighter and launched toward the orbiting station, he felt like he'd signed his own death certificate. The station loomed in the distance, a massive, spiked structure orbiting the planet like a predatory insect. Its blinking red lights made it look like it was watching them, waiting for their approach. I still think this is insane, Ethan muttered. Less talking, more surviving, Nyx said. The freighter docked at one of the maintenance ports, and the trio slipped inside. The station's corridors were cold and sterile, the walls humming faintly with energy. Nyx led the way, moving like a shadow. Threx stayed close to Ethan, clutching a datapad as if his life depended on it. Down this corridor, Nyx whispered. The control room is past the security checkpoint. The checkpoint was heavily guarded. 2 towering battle droids stood flanking the entrance, their glowing visors scanning the corridor. We'll never get past them, Ethan muttered. I'll handle the droids, Nyx said. You two get inside and start the broadcast. Before Ethan could argue, Nyx moved. She was a blur of motion, flipping over one of the droids and driving her blade into its core. Sparks flew as it collapsed. The second droid fired, but Nyx ducked, slicing through its arm in a fluid strike before finishing it with a dagger to the head. Go! Nyx shouted. Ethan and Threx ran into the control room, breathless. Rows of monitors displayed troop movements, syndicate plans, and dozens of encrypted messages. Threx plugged his datapad into the main console, fingers flying across the keys. Almost there, Threx muttered. Just keep them off me. Nyx appeared in the doorway, blades drawn as armed mercenaries stormed down the corridor. She fought like a dancer, weaving, twisting, and striking with deadly precision. Despite her skill, they kept coming. I'm working as fast as I can, Threx grunted. Almost got it, now! Ethan slammed his fist on the control panel's activation switch. Across the galaxy, screens blinked to life with Vorgoth's hidden corruption, backstabbing deals, sabotage, and the syndicate's twisted web of alliances. The criminals relying on Vorgoth's influence now found themselves exposed and vulnerable. The power structure of Vorgoth's empire unraveled in real time. Time to go! Nyx shouted. They sprinted back to the ship, narrowly dodging blaster fire as syndicate forces scrambled in panic. Threx hit the launch controls the moment they reached the cockpit, and the freighter shot into the sky. Below, the station's lights flickered, overwhelmed by the chaos they had unleashed. Hours later, back on Earth, Ethan stood on his balcony watching the stars. The syndicate wouldn't disappear overnight, but their power had been shattered. The bounty on his head had already been dropped as rival factions turned on each other. For the first time in what felt like forever, he didn't feel like he was waiting for death to knock on his door. Nix joined him on the balcony, leaning against the railing.